All right, welcome back to Influential Dental, where Mike Keeter and I are bringing on the most influential dentists and dental professionals in the industry. And today we are so excited to have Dr. Mark Costas on our show. Dr. Mark, welcome to the show. I know you said I could call you Mark, but it's so hard for me to do that.
Thank you so much for having me, you guys. It's great to be here. It's great to see your smiling faces.
I want to tell you a little bit about Mark before we jump into the show, and then we'll just dive right into his journey. But he is an international keynote speaker. He has his own podcast, which has, I don't know, listenership in 150 countries, I think, worldwide, called The Dentalpreneur. I've been on that show. It's been a lot of fun, actually being asked a couple of times, so I appreciate that so much. He is a best-selling author. His credentials go on and on and on. He's working with a nonprofit, which is really interesting. I'd love to talk a little bit about today. But more interesting even than that is some of the challenges you've overcome and what your life looks like today and, where you've been. So without further ado, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. It's so good to be here.
Okay, so there was something. So, you and I, every time we get together, it's kind of a chat and we're almost catching up, it feels like. And we never have an agenda. I don't think we've ever had an agenda on, any of our episodes with you. But one of the things that I pulled up today about you was a little bit of your background with respect to, you being in the professional development space that I didn't actually know about you. Now, I know you've been coaching and doing all of that stuff, but can you share a little bit about what led you into the professional development space as a whole?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I mean, this is kind of a very, very quick genesis story. So I'm a first generation American. My parents came here in the late 1960s on a program called Third Preference, and that was for professionals that they were trying to recruit from other countries. My dad was an electrical and mechanical engineer, so he came here literally with like $100 in his pocket and his degrees, and he got hired by IBM, and we moved around the country a lot. But he is like the epitome of the American kind of dream, and it was kind of through his experience and through his example that I was able to formulate this work ethic and kind of grit that I attribute everything in my career to. I had some pretty significant learning and attention issues when I was growing up. I didn't learn the same way that other kids did. Have a mild form of dyslexia. All three of my boys also have this. So this was something that was undiagnosed at the time. There was no such thing as, dyslexia tests like they have now. And there's no kind of, there's no special programs in order to help people learn around those sorts of things. So what we realized was that if my teachers read my exams to me and gave me extra time, then I was able to do really well in my classes. But it was until we figured that out that they didn't think that, they thought that I had like really, really big issues, but it really was just dyslexia. So, that kind of followed me along through my entire educational journey. When I was 16 years old, I had moved around a lot because my dad got moved from town to town. When I was 16 years old, I was playing in my first varsity baseball game, misjudged a fly ball, ran smack into the left field fence, and ended up losing all of my front teeth and broke my jaw. My upper anterior teeth from 6 to 11 basically got knocked out. And for the next 16 months, I was kind of in and out of dental offices, dental specialty offices, plastic surgery offices, and they kind of rebuilt my face. And that was kind of the beginning of my interest in dentistry. And dentistry was never on my radar before. But, when I saw what these professionals were able to do, it was really inspiring. I decided at that point that I wanted to be a dentist. But the learning issues kind of were always getting.
So
Go ahead.
that's insane. How did I not know this about you? I feel like I heard a tidbit maybe when you were on stage once, but that's an insane start into dentistry. I had no idea. Mike, had you read that or did you know this?
I did not, and I'm very inspired. I have some follow-up questions on that, but obviously, just that intestinal fortitude that you had to, to keep going. and I want to see how that plays within dentistry, and then how that also into influence and how you carry yourself now. But no, I did not know that, Julian.
So I ended up playing just a single year of college football, but I still was intended to be a dentist. But the attention and the learning disability kind of followed me around. I ended up graduating from the University of California, San Diego. I transferred there, and I had maybe an average dental school application. So I applied to 10 dental schools my first year out, got rejected to all 10. And I went about kind of trying to figure out how I was going to get into dental school. So I failed at, the whole first round, not even an interview, not a secondary application, just straight rejections across the board. So during that time, that first year out, I decided that, well, I at least should try to do something else. So I ended up getting into the executive MBA program at the University of San Diego in California. And I started my executive MBA. Also was trying to get kind of a corporate job. Didn't get hired anywhere because of my GPA, and I was a psychology major, not the best applicant for, a corporate position. So I ended up buying my first business at the same time. So I was working this business, which was a catering truck. I bought a franchise to a catering truck. So I would drive my catering truck around all day. I would go to different construction sites and honk my horn and serve, burritos and cheeseburgers and Marlboro Lights and black coffee to construction workers, and move on to the next construction site and do that. So I would go to my MBA classes at night smelling like French fries with grease stained t-shirts. And that's what I did for that first couple of years. Applied again the second year and got rejected again. 5 more schools. There was 15 rejections into this, and continued to go through the MBA. And the third year, I applied for 6 more schools, got 1 single acceptance. So I got 20 rejections and a single acceptance after 3 years and 21 tries, and finally got into dental school after 3 years of trying.
What was going through your head as a somewhat practical psychologist, if you will? Like, what was going through your head when you kept applying? At no point did you think, done, I'm giving up at, try 12? Like, what was your stopping point? Did you have an idea?
Yeah, I don't know if I would have applied for a 4th year. In fact, I was pretty sure that I hadn't gotten in. I got an additional 5 rejections, and I said, this is probably the end of the road. This is a sign. And I did end up getting this packet in the mail like 3 months after the application cycle was supposed to be over. And I opened it up, and it was a conditional acceptance to the Marquette University. And I didn't even know that I reapplied to Marquette. They sent me this postcard, which was, I thought, just kind of updating my address. I filled that out really quick, forgot that I had done it, but it turns out that was a supplemental application, and they reprocessed my application from the previous year. So when I opened up this packet, I'm like, what could this possibly be? It was the conditional acceptance. I had to go through this thing called the pre-enrollment support program. So I had to go through this course through the summertime prior to freshman year. And if I passed all the courses, then they were going to let me into the freshman class, or the D1 class, 1998. So that's actually how I got in, and left the MBA program just before graduating with my MBA. So I got, I think, most of the pertinent information from the MBA. But, when people ask me if I learned about business in business school or in my first entrepreneurial venture, I tell them every single time it was the Roach Coach. It was the small business, being an entrepreneur, learning the basics of marketing and payroll and taxes and inventory control and leadership. That's what I really, really learned a ton about business, was from owning my first business, not necessarily from, the executive MBA.
Yeah. So, I don't want to jump around and make people crazy, but how many practices did you end up with at some point? Just to fast track, I mean, you sold a bunch of practices, didn't you, at some point?
Yeah, I owned 16 dental practices from the time that 1 year after graduation, I bought my first dental practice, and in the full arc of my practice, um, clinical journey / practice ownership journey, it was 16 total practices.
Wow. Okay. So I am curious. So obviously people have these stories like this. Everybody's inspired by it, right? Because we can hear that you're amazing, but if you don't tell us what you overcame, then we can't relate, right? Um, but so you've done all of this stuff, but that was just getting you in. Like what else then transpired to get you to where you're at today, where you're inspiring so many people and now giving back on such a level that is happening internationally? There have to have been some other major things that you've had to overcome, as a practice owner, even, right?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's interesting because my dad ended up with a corporate position his entire life. He was with IBM his entire career. From the time that he landed in the United States until he retired, he was with IBM as an electrical engineer. So he walked the corporate walk, but his true desire was to be an entrepreneur and own his own business. So like dinner talk was not about sports. It was not about anything else. It was about small business. Your uncle's doing this, your aunt's doing this, your cousins are doing this. It was about, small business. And so I was built by, or raised around rather, kind of an entrepreneurial type environment. We were always talking about business, talking about current entrepreneurs, talking about, personal development. My dad actually got me into personal development at a very early age, just from the books that he was reading. I would wander into his study and I would pick up Think and Grow Rich was the first book I ever read cover to cover. Learned about kind of the mindset of wealth and masterminds and just kind of goal setting, short and long term goal setting. So that was kind of the gateway drug for me. I've read just about every contemporary personal development book that you could ever imagine. I've read them all.
So, Mike, I know you have questions, but I have a quick question about the mastermind. I'm going to stop dominating this, as it's no longer co-hosting; it's hosting. Bye, Mike. No. So, did you early on in your career end up joining masterminds or starting masterminds? What did your mastermind journey like? How did that start for you?
Yeah. I mean, while I was still in undergrad, I was in a bunch of different mastermind groups, entrepreneurial mastermind groups, pre-dental mastermind groups. So masterminds were just kind of a concept that I understood and I embraced, because I always realized that, collective wisdom was always better than a single person standing up there with their single experience trying to teach you anything. So the kind of groupthink and collective sharing has always been kind of, collaboration has always kind of been what I was, attracted to, and that's kind of what I created when it was time for me to create my own coaching business.
Yeah, and I'm very inspired by your journey and thoughts, and it's kind of interesting. My background is my dad was an entrepreneur, and people around me are entrepreneurs, but I chose the corporate path, and now I'm kind of a late bloomer, kind of getting into more of my entrepreneur spirit, and so on. So having this conversation is making me smile and look at kind of my own journey. So thanks for inspiring me to make some changes and things. My question was about. What drives you, and obviously it sounds like a lot. You have that foundation, but again, it was your own internal, looks like, drive. Is that something that you gathered from within? Was that something you saw outside of it? Was it wanting to get to a certain goal? Because we're always talking about goals and goal setting. Was it a type of wealth or type of influence? I guess, what is your internal drive to grow within yourselves, and what do you espouse to others on what they should look for to get their self to that next level?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I appreciate the question. I think that I've always been just extremely driven, and I couldn't articulate this when I was younger, but now I can very clearly articulate the fact that what I'm searching for is just the highest, most evolved version of myself, the best version of myself, whatever that is. And I still don't believe that I've actually discovered what that is yet. But, we talk about this concept inside the mastermind group, my mastermind group, of like, your hero and your anti-hero. And it's like, what composite human can you create in your mind? Like, maybe this this athlete or um, this particular entrepreneur or this analytical type person? Like, who could you actually create in your mind to aspire to be like? Is it a single person? Is it a group of people? Like, what does that look like? And it took me a long time to realize that for me, it's just the next best version of myself. Because I don't want to try to fit into a mold of anybody else. I don't want to aspire to be anybody else but myself in 10 years when I'm a newer and better and more evolved version of myself. So I couldn't articulate it back then, but now that's kind of what I've always been driven to do. In athletics, I always, I was the smallest kid, but I always won like the Golden Cleat Award or the Golden Helmet Award, which means you were the biggest hustler. You weren't necessarily the best on the team, but you were the best as far as inspirational, and you tried harder than anybody else. And, it's interesting when you are young in your business career, in your clinical career, in your practice ownership journey, you only have a couple tools in your toolbox, right? It's how hard you're willing to work, the amount of effort that you're willing to expend and energy that you're willing to expend. And that's just about it, because you don't have a whole lot of money. You have more time than money, and you work as hard as you can for as long as you can during that kind of chapter of your journey. And when you evolve and when you start to get more sophisticated, you start to get a little bit of knowledge, then you realize that you can start offloading, you can automate, you can delegate, you can create an executive level team. And then that gets you to the next level. And then once you get to the next level and you have these people, these smart people surrounding you, then you have to learn how to lead them more effectively and how to duplicate them and how to duplicate your processes and how do you scale your operation. So there's always a next level that I'm trying to figure out. I haven't reached my full potential yet. I don't think I'm anywhere close, but that's kind of the idea.
Mark, what I like as well is that can resonate with everyone, because everyone's is their own personal journey at their own level, right? Whether it's education, whether it's where they come from, where they want to go. But if you're battling yourself and your own aspirations, then it's only you to look inwards. You don't have to worry about the neighbor or the dentist down the street or across the road. You want to be the best person you could be. And I think that's refreshing, because you're always trying to compete against someone down the road or up the road or this person. And it's nice to hear that it's all about yourself and your own personal journey and incremental growth, right? Whether that's from week to week, month to month, year to year, like you said, and we're always learning, always growing. So I think that resonates with me, and I'm sure it resonates with all of our listeners as well. Okay, Julianne.
This is not usually how we roll, but usually we just like to interrupt each other. But no, but you were talking about, okay, so you're talking about, if you could sort of envision your gurus, if you will, or these people that you look up to. And and I have lots of jokes about it too, but that come to mind. But now that I love this idea of becoming the best version of yourself, right? I get that. But have there been some profound people in your life that have kind of been those gurus for you? I was like you. I read Think and Grow Rich and How to Win Friends and Influence People when I was like 8, So, and so those, Dale Carnegie was, and back in the day, I'm like, that's amazing. Or whoever. But who have been those people that you've looked up to as guides, if you will?
Yeah. I mean, it's an awesome question. First and foremost, it was my dad, it was my parents, what they were able to do. Even at a very young age, I was very appreciative of the fact that, like, I looked around and I had the ability to look around and say, wow, we're doing pretty well. I mean, we were upper middle class. We weren't super wealthy, but had been back to the Philippines a couple times. I had traveled to Mexico. I had gone abroad, and I saw what certain people lived like, right? I have cousins that have been trying to get to the United States on a green card for decades now. My dad had the foresight to say, this is a good idea. We're going to take this opportunity and we're going to go. And he did, with nothing else but his education. He was able to make an incredible life for all of us. He was able to make sure that we all had, my sister and I both had, a higher education. My sister is extremely, extremely successful as well. She is vice president of one of the big 3 banks, like way, way, way up there. She's got 5,000 people that work for her. So very, very successful. So my dad was first and foremost, the biggest influence, I think, just by example. And it's interesting because I know a lot of people, and myself not included. I'm not like this. I have three incredible, successful boys. One's 20, one's 18, one's 15 now. And I'm not the kind of dad that sits down and say, all right, kids, here's what character is. Here's what a gentleman is. Here's how you protect your family. I just kind of try to lead by example. And I followed my dad's example because that's how he was. He never sat down and said, here's a lesson, son. I just kind of watched him, and I saw how he conducted himself in the world. And that was probably the biggest influence in my life. But then, like, to be able to expose me, even indirectly, by the books that he had laying around in his office, to like really great thought leaders like Dale Carnegie and Tony Robbins. I actually had the opportunity to meet Tony Robbins. I was on the board of ambassadors for one of his companies. That was really cool. And Dan Kennedy, Bill Glazer, like really forward thinking marketers. I've always tried to surround myself with people that are much, much smarter than me. So like that was another thing. There's no shame in being the dumbest person in the room. In fact, that's what I try to be all the time. Once you feel yourself being the smartest person in the room, then you need to elevate rooms, right? So I'm extremely comfortable being in a room where I'm the biggest novice, I know the least, and everybody around me seems to be smarter and more successful. That's where I'm very, very comfortable. I don't want people, surrounding me that are like, yes, Mark, yes men surrounding me, telling me how great I am. I need a constant reminder that there's another level all the time.
I love that. I'm curious though, what percentage, if you could break it into percentage or whatever, of your success, if you will, because you are one of the smartest people in the room so often, would be attributed to mindset versus strategy, for example? Or do they go hand in hand and you can't separate them? Or, what is that secret? If somebody could tactically, I mean, to say your dad did all this amazing stuff, my first question is how? How did he do it? Like, what was it about him that gave him the wherewithal, or ability to see it through?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer, and I don't think that I actually realized this till later in life, that motivation and willpower can only get you so far. It's really about who you surround yourself with and controlling your environment, right? So, like, I started working out when I was 14 years old, eighth grade. I was a wrestler, I was a baseball player and a football player, and it was mandatory that we worked out the hour before school started, right? I've never in my fifth decade now taken more than 4 days off of the gym. And that isn't because I'm motivated every single day. It's about the environment that I created for myself, right? So I know that as soon as I wake up, and I'm a naturally short sleeper, early riser, I know that I wake up at 4:30 in the morning or 5 o'clock when I'm sleeping in, that I fall right into my tennis shoes. I go for a run, and it's not motivation now. It's not mindset. It's actually how I set up my environment and the habits that I've created. So back to your question, like, is it mindset? Is it strategy? I think that mindset is very, very important when that's the only thing you got, right? But when you have the ability to strategize, surround yourself with really smart people, surround yourself with the environment that you created, including habits that you formed over the years, that actually trumps mindset, because willpower will only go so far.
Yeah. Well, and that's why it's so important, like you said earlier, about surrounding yourself with that team or those mentors or those people around you that are smarter than you or come from a different perspective, right? Your mindset or your vision may be this narrow when you need some people around you that will create a holistic environment, whether it's in a dental practice, multiple dental companies, so I think that's very important. And I think those practical methods that you talk about, again, resonate. You're not necessarily talking about, you know, uh, dental terminology or anything else. It's about a mindset with the environment and creating that environment to succeed. I know we're running up on a little bit of time, and gosh, we could talk for hours, or I could anyway. But I really want to talk more about kind of your small outreach international for some of the remaining time, and then maybe also circle back to some practical things from running a day to day practice or relating with patients or others. But um, could you tell our audience and myself and Julianne a little bit more about your nonprofit, the Smile Outreach, and what that's all about, and how people can become involved if that's something that they can do or we can do, and why that's so important as a professional to give back.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this, Mike. This is my next chapter. This is where I'm spending the vast majority of my energy these days. And 2 years ago, we created Smile Outreach International, which is an official 501c3. And for people that have never formed a 501c3, it's not just like but create a ton of effort. You have to form the 501c3, and then you have to, if you want to take donors, for every state that you want to accept a donation from, you have to have clearance from their Secretary of State. So we created the 501c3, and then we got the permission to accept donations in each of the 50 states. And that was a long, long process. But this all started back when I was in dental school, and I had the ability to kind of work in underserved areas, to do a bunch of volunteer work. I went overseas a couple times, and I was able to see how much impact you can make on the underserved, communities throughout the world, not just internationally, but in the United States as well, domestically as well. So as soon as I graduated, I started working in a homeless dental clinic in downtown Phoenix. And there was so much need. And I realized how good it made me feel. Like selfishly, I felt better when I was done after a hard day's work, working for free for these people that would give me a hug for doing, a facial composite on tooth number 8, because it just changed their confidence in the way that they felt. It made them more employable because they were smiling big. The ability to do that for somebody was just extremely powerful. So I continued to kind of go on international mission trips throughout my career, always knowing that at some point I wanted to found my own foundation, to start my own foundation. 2 years ago, I was finally in the financial situation where I could start this on my own. And also because, we've done 2,100 podcast episodes, and we get, 8 to 10,000 downloads per episode. So I knew that if I was able to talk about this, that I would have a ton of support. I have unlimited resources as far as volunteers that bubble up and want to come on these trips with us. Last year, we were able to go to Tanzania, to the Dominican Republic, to Fiji, and to Mexico. We did well over $1 million in free dentistry over the last year. We saw well over 1,200 patients for free at our own expense. And what we do is, on the tail end of my summits, which we have every year, we get between 700 and 1,000 people at our summits. We used to just have a big celebration party after the summits. Now we have a gala, a fundraising gala, and people have been so generous. We were able to raise $300,000 the first year, $300,000 the second year. I think that we're on pace to probably raise about $500,000 in our third year. And my idea about Smile Outreach International is not just to go into a community with a bunch of volunteers, do a pop-up clinic, and help as many people as possible and never come back, because that's great for the time being, but it's not a good, sustainable, helpful thing for that particular community. So what we're doing now is we're looking for permanent places. We just found one in Mexico. We're going to construct a permanent dental facility so people can go. They could take their entire office. We'll set up patients for them. They could deliver free dental work. We will supply everything, including the equipment, the supplies, the support staff. All the patients will be there, ready to go. So that's what we want to do all over the world. We have one in Mexico going. We have one in the Dominican Republic that we're going to build. And that's just my idea of what I want to do. This is my legacy. This is what I want to continue long past my existence on this earth.
I think it's incredible, and you have taken on a huge and massive project, and I know what you're talking about when you talk about forming a nonprofit, let alone getting to the place where you're trying to see this vision come to life, and it's already happening for you. What are your fears around what your vision is? It's massive, and what's coming up for you, and how can people support right now to address that? What next? Because this is all part of you evolving with everything that you're doing. So what's coming up for you right now?
Yeah, thank you. To get involved, just go to smileoutreachinternational.org. And there's plenty of opportunities to volunteer and to donate. as well if you aren't in a situation where you can actually travel. As far as my fears, I don't know if it's so much as fears as um, what I worry about is that in my lifetime, I'm not going to be able to accomplish everything that I want to accomplish. And now that I have kind of this cookbook on what we're looking for, we have plenty of donors. We have large vendors that are willing to supply the equipment and the supplies. Is not being organized enough to spread worldwide as fast as I want to. I'm an extremely impatient person. I like things to move fast. I mean, the fact that we were able to have 2 sustainable clinics that'll be open by the end of 2025 is moving really fast, but I wish it was 5, you know. And I'd like to be in Africa, Southeast Asia. I'd like to be in Latin America. I'd like to be in the South Pacific, and eventually I will be, but I want it to be yesterday.
Awesome. Yeah. So really quickly on that, and then Mike, I know you have something. But so how? I mean, with the principles that you've already applied to your entrepreneurial life so far, how can you level that up in terms of outsourcing, for example, or what is the plan to be able to tackle that, or are you figuring that out right now?
Yeah, I mean, this is crazy. I mean, when I started this whole entrepreneurial journey, it was dental practices, and that was my sole focus. And then people started asking me to speak on stages about how I was able to build kind of multiple practices. And then, and then the podcast came along, and then we became a live event company and a coaching company, and now we have the Dental Success Network, which is 1,500 licensed dentists that we have a buying group and virtual continuing education and an online community. So this thing is evolving and it's taking on different iterations. But what's cool is that as things evolve, each step that we've built has led to the next, right? So the coaching group led to DSN. DSN led to SOI. SOI is leading to, these clinics all over the world. And not only that, we have kind of the ability to take our existing resources and create an even bigger organization. So we're starting our own DSO called the Dental Success Partners. It's some of the best practices within the coaching group that I have. We have about 230 active one-on-one coaching clients, one of the biggest in the world, the fastest growing in the world, definitely, as far as coaching groups go. And we're able to kind of handpick the ones that are ready to transition, and we are able to buy their practices and form a larger organization where we are partnering with them. And, we've built a 9-figure business, which is very difficult for me to even wrap my head around, from where I started to where I am now. In fact, at the last mastermind meeting, I drew this kind of arc of like, here's where I started right here. This kid that was first generation immigrant, couldn't read. And here's where we are now. We have $100 million company. We have this huge charity. We have the sky is the limit. Like if you were to look at this little kid, like where we started to where we are now, it's almost impossible to fathom. And the whole idea there is not, I'm great. The whole idea is like anything is possible. Anything is possible if you surround yourself with the right people and put yourself in the right environment.
Well, Mark, I firmly believe that. And I think even though you're impatient, I'm kind of that same way. I think with your messaging and the people you surround yourself with, you'll get to those 5 locations, those 10 locations, those 20 locations much quicker than you will even imagine. So I wish all the success, and hopefully we can stay connected and be involved in any way we can. But I very much thank you for being on our podcast and getting to learn a little bit more about you and your vision. And, like I said, it's very inspiring. And I think people can just take a little bit about what you said and take that on for themselves and their success, and to do that in their own communities, their own towns. I mean, they can reach for the stars like you have, but they can also do it in a smaller way as well. So I guess one question I would have, and sorry to monopolize your time, is what would you say to those that are interested in, wanting to do something in their own way, in their own communities, maybe not to the scale you are, maybe to the scale you're doing, but what would you say to them on what they should do or what they need to do to kind of take that next level and to be that type of influence in their own communities?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. Well, I visited when we were in Tanzania. We visited this orphanage that was started by Italian missionaries, and their idea was that in Tanzania in the 80s, the AIDS epidemic was just ravaging the population. and a lot of parents were dying and leaving a bunch of orphan kids. So these Italian missionaries went to Tanzania, and their idea was to create an orphanage just to give these kids a dignified place to die, because they all had HIV, and they thought that their parents are now dead. They were wandering the streets. Let's bring them all in. We'll give them a comfortable and loving place to die. And it was around kind of the late 80s when the antivirals started coming out, and they were starting to figure out that, oh, you can actually survive with HIV, and with education, like maybe we can stop the spread of HIV onto this, younger generation. So what ended up happening was the kids started surviving, right? So this orphanage turned from, hey, this is a place where these kids are going to have a dignified place to die, to now we're going to raise these kids in a loving environment, and we want to encourage them to go out into this community and do something positive. And, the priest that started this orphanage told this story, and it's kind of a common story, and I've heard it before, but the way he told it was really touching. Their mascot is a starfish because of the story of the young man that was walking on the beach. There's thousands of starfish that have been washed ashore, and this kid was throwing a starfish one at a time into the water. And each starfish that he threw into the water, he would save that starfish from exposure, because all the starfish that were on shore were all going to die from not being in the water. And this gentleman walked up to the kid and he goes, "Hey, there's thousands of starfish here. You're not really making that much of a difference. You could be here all day, every day for the next year, and you wouldn't be able to even make a dent in all these starfish." And the kid picks up another starfish. He throws it back into the ocean. He goes, "I just made a big difference to that starfish." So that is kind of the philosophy that I see. I could never treat all of the people in the world that need help, but each patient that we do serve and help, it's making a huge difference to them. So if people could kind of take that whole spirit into their own community, even if you're volunteering once a year at a clinic, or even if you are doing a free dental day for veterans or for abused mothers or something like that, you're making a huge difference in your own way.
I love that. Okay, so then I have a final question for you, because you talked about your younger self. And so if you could, Mark, go back and give your younger self a piece of advice, right? Knowing that it would have an impact on your current self, what piece of advice would you give your younger self?
I people have asked me this question before. I like the question, and it's difficult for me because I'm not somebody that looks back with regret, because I really believe that everything that I have experienced, good or bad, has led me to where I am now. But, if I was able to talk to 18-year-old Mark or 20-year-old Mark, I would say, stop taking yourself so seriously. Give yourself a break. Every little setback and challenge and speed bump is not the end of the world. Keep on moving forward, keep on smiling, and be kinder to the people around you. That's probably the number one lesson that I would try to impart myself.
Love that. I love it. That's beautiful. And yeah, I've been asked that question. If I was asked again right now, I wouldn't even know how to answer it. So I apologize. So how can people reach you? What's the very best way? How do they find you on social? And thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. It's been a fabulous podcast. I hope that all of our listeners find it as inspiring as I have.
Oh, well, I thank you guys so much for your time today. Easiest way to find me on socials, it's Dr. Mark Costes. That's Costes. I'm very active on Instagram. I post every single day. Lots of reels and free content there. The Dentalpreneur podcast, every single day we have 2,100 and 2122. That's how many episodes we've done so far. 6 days a week, then 5 days a week, then 6 days a week. Since we started in 2015, June, I've never missed an episode. So we've been very, very consistent as far as that goes. It's been a labor of love, and I've loved doing it. If you're interested in finding more about our coaching services, go to truedentalsuccess.com. If you want to get engaged with any of our nonprofit trips in any way, just go to smileoutreachinternational.org.
Amazing. Thank you so much to all of our listeners. Mike, thank you for a great show again. Mark, thank you for being on it. And if people want to reach American Dental Institute, they can find that at americandentalinstitute.com and certainly find us on social as well. But thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.